The girls were giving it 110% when all of a sudden they heard a loud noise. The coach rushes to the mat to a fallen teammate, gripping her leg tightly. The sad truth is this is a common scenario in cheerleading today. In my 4 years as a high school cheerleader, we dealt with at least one broken bone per season. We had broken legs, arms, ankles, and even a few noses. Hello, my name is Laura Beth Cobb, and today we'll be discussing the role of the nurse practitioner in preventing injuries. The article I chose is What Comes Up Must Come Down, a primary care approach in preventing injuries amongst the high-flying cheerleaders. The article comes from the Journal of the American Association of Nurse Practitioners. The author of this article is Nicole Waters, who has her master's, bachelor's, and RN degree. She is currently at the School of Nursing in Columbia University in New York. The author's thesis states that as more people participate in cheerleading and the more difficult the stunts become, the more injuries will occur. The reason I chose this topic is because it represents my past, present, and future life. I was a high school cheerleader. Now I work in an all-star gym, and someday I hope to become a nurse practitioner. My main points that I'll be discussing today are injuries, risk factors for injuries, and the role of the nurse practitioner in preventing injuries. The first point that I would like to talk about is risk factors for injuries. Some of the risk factors for injuries are poor nutrition, growing bodies, poor safety regulations, and negative social influences such as the pressures the state's in. After the risk factors have been identified, the nurse practitioner's job will be to educate the coaches, parents, and cheerleaders about these risk factors. This study indicates that the nurse practitioner plays an important role in identifying risk factors. The next point that I will be discussing is injuries. Injuries can be classified into two groups: non-life-threatening injuries and catastrophic injuries. Non-life-threatening injuries include sprains, strains, abrasions, and fractures. Catastrophic injuries include injuries to the spinal cord and brain. This is relevant because in cheerleading is not considered a sport, so therefore it is not regulated. Nurse practitioners need to be aware of the injuries that occur in cheerleading. Now that we have identified risk factors for injuries, we will look at the last point, which is the role of the nurse practitioner in preventing injuries in cheerleading. Some ways that the nurse practitioner helps to regulate cheerleading is by giving guidance on proper nutrition, pre-participation physicals, and the correct way to do warm-ups and conditioning. Pre-participation physicals allow the nurse practitioner to do follow-ups on the cheerleaders who have risk factors. This is relevant to the field of health because cheerleading has now become a contact sport. In conclusion, the main points that I had talked about today are risk factors for injuries, and the role of the nurse practitioner in preventing injuries. This article really spoke to me because cheerleading was and is an important part of my life. I think that the stunts are becoming more difficult and they need to have safety regulations. I think cheer needs to become recognized as a sport and needs to have appropriate guidelines. As the title states, what goes up must come down. Let us ensure that our cheerleaders come down safely.